Hey everybody, Ryan here, and I am here with Brittany Sutherland. Brittany Sutherland from Peguis, Manitoba. That is correct, right, Brittany?
Yes, that is.
And one of the stars of Arm Nation on APTN.
Yeah.
Tell me just a little bit about yourself. We already said where you're from, what you do out there, some personal things that you might want to share before I get into the arm wrestling part of it.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Brittany Sutherland. I am 32 years old and I am from Peguis First Nation. We are the largest reserve in Manitoba, so there's a huge population. Yeah, a mother of 3 children. My oldest son is 14. I have a 12-year-old daughter and I also have a 7-year-old son. All of my children arm wrestle, by the way. They have been arm wrestling basically since I started. Back in 2015, I started arm wrestling, I guess you can say pro, with the Manitoba Arm Wrestling Association. Prior to that, I was arm wrestling in my community once a year and basically winning every year. So what I did was I looked on the internet to see if there was actually any arm wrestling out there. And sure enough, I found that Manitoba Arm Wrestling Association had a club. So I was interested in that. I didn't think that I had what it takes to actually go compete at the provincials. It was like 2 weeks prior to me finding out that the Manitoba Arm Wrestling Association did have a club. Anyways, I went and I doubted myself because the girls look really strong and intimidating, and I didn't think that I would be able to do it, but sure enough, I ended up winning a gold medal, and I was super happy with that, surprised myself, and so did my son. My son actually ended up winning 2 gold medals, right and left arm, so we were happy with that, and ever since that day, we've just kind of attended events that were taking place in Winnipeg and surrounding communities, and I've basically been winning almost every time. I hold a title, the provincial title, gold medal for 4 years. The first year was 2015, so 2016, 2017, 2018, gold medals. Super happy with those results, and yeah.
So you've gone to the national championships in the past. What is your best finish, and are you going to go this year?
Oh, yes. Okay, so 2016, I attended Saskatoon, Saskatchewan national championships, and that was one of my best finishes. I ended up winning a silver medal there. Prior to going, I can say I trained, but I didn't put everything into my training. Like, I lifted weights and stuff like that, and I didn't really give it my all. So now I'm actually realizing how important arm wrestling training is. Like, ever since I started, right from 2015, I didn't really give arm wrestling my all. I would go and I would win, right? And I would kind of say to myself, like, well, yeah, I won, good for me kind of thing. And didn't really give it my all. But now I'm starting to realize, like, how important training actually is. And I really want to take arm wrestling to the next level. And I want to start training harder and, just give it my all and just go with it and try win a national title, hopefully someday. Hopefully this year, actually.
So you also have a position with the Canadian Arm Wrestling Federation. Is that correct?
Yes, actually, it's kind of just in the makings. Like, I was more or less told about it. It's not really down on paper or anything like that yet, but it's in the makings, and I am definitely looking forward to that.
Now, can you talk about what that title would be?
Yes, well, actually, I was contacted by the Canadian Arm Wrestling Federation, and they actually, I guess they discussed before contacting me that they were looking for someone to represent the First Nation arm wrestlers of Canada. So I guess from the show Arm Nation, they kind of got a feeling of who I was, what I did in my community and stuff like that. So they were interested in choosing me. So I was a little bit shocked and I was a little bit scared. But, I just said to myself, like, obviously I can do this. I've been on TV already, so I don't see how I cannot do this. So I am going to go through with it, and I am going to represent the First Nation Arm Wrestlers of Canada.
So you're on the TV show Arm Nation. You mentioned that.
Yeah.
How did you get involved with that television show?
Well, if it wasn't for the Manitoba Arm Wrestling Association, I would have not been involved whatsoever. So I guess my involvement there, I'm not exactly sure how everything rolled out, but I'm pretty sure it may have been Jim Finley that somehow was contacted by APTN. So he may have given my name to APTN, and we just kind of went from there. I wasn't really sure, like, when I was first contacted, if it was like a legit thing, if it was actually going to go through. But sure enough, it did, and it was super exciting to actually experience all of, everything that we experienced with Arm Nation, and actually sit down and watch, myself and my family on TV, and the experience was actually very amazing, and I'm very thrilled that I was able to be a part of that TV show.
Now, is there going to be a season 2? Have we heard anything about that?
Not sure yet, not sure. So that's what we're hoping for, and if that does go through, I'm super excited and hoping and fingers crossed for that, that everything goes through for the season 2.
So you're someone that's very active on social media, and you're promoting your training and things like that.
Yes.
Can you speak at all on what you do for training?
Well, you know what? I'll start back from when I started training, basically. I started training in my parents' basement at the age of like 14 or 15 years old. I guess my dad has always been a weightlifter, and he had everything that I basically needed to start. So I was actually in freestyle wrestling back in the day, in junior high, a bit of my senior high years, and I was actually very successful in that sport. So that kind of stopped, I guess. I don't know what happened there, but the wrestling coach moved to another school, something like that. So that was basically why I started training, lifting weights, punching the punching bag and running, doing all that fun stuff. Anyways, when wrestling stopped, I was devastated because that was my favorite sport. We would travel all over. We would travel to the United States. I would have to wrestle boys and actually beat them, come home with gold medals, and that was my number one sport. So it stopped, and I kind of just lost everything for a few years after wrestling stopped. So I basically stopped training. I was in high school sports like basketball, volleyball, stuff like that, but it wasn't anything to really train for the way I was training prior to when I was in freestyle wrestling. So I've been basically training since those years, way back then, and I basically taught myself. So the workouts that I started doing way back then have actually, I carried them through into my middle, into my, actually, sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
Great. Yeah. So basically what I taught myself back then is what I've been doing ever since I've been training. You know, I didn't really switch up my training style, and didn't really, like, I added a few new workouts and stuff like that, but it wasn't, it was basically just what I had taught myself. Up until just like this past year, I really started thinking about like arm wrestling, and you know how all these big top name arm wrestlers actually train, following a few top arm wrestlers on Instagram and checking out their pages, and seeing their training techniques, their training styles, and their training workouts. And I realized, like, what am I doing? You know, I want to become this big arm wrestler someday, and I'm not even training for it. You know, I was always working out, lifting weights, curling, stuff like that, but actually never training to be an arm wrestler. So I realized, and I'm like, okay, this all has to stop. You know, I have to start training. So basically, I've been training for the past 4 months in arm wrestling, and that is it. And the difference I feel when I arm wrestle, like, I haven't really been arm wrestling much within the past 4 months, but I do have arm wrestling practices in my community, and I don't have very much women to practice with, so I practice against the guys, and I've been feeling a huge difference ever since I started training in arm wrestling. And I kind of say to myself, like, why didn't I start this long ago? You know, maybe I actually would have been more successful, because I am very successful here in Manitoba, but when I actually go to nationals to compete Canada-wide, I'm not as successful. And it like, you know, it's devastating for me, because I'm so used to winning a gold medal. So when I don't win that gold medal, I'm very, very hard on myself. And I know I shouldn't be so hard on myself. But, you know, with the goals I have in place, I want to be successful in the sport.
So what is next for you?
Next for me is, I've been competing in the 70 kg division for the past 4 years at nationals. I am 8 pounds away from the 60 kg division, and I know I will do very successful in that division. So from now up until nationals, I am going to cut weight. 8 pounds is nothing. Like, I know arm wrestlers cut 20, 30 pounds, you know, in a month. 8 pounds is nothing. So right now, I'm working on cutting that weight. I actually started doing cardio more often. I don't really like cardio, but I've been doing it. And I've been pretty successful, actually. I think I lost a few pounds already. So I am planning on going to nationals and winning that gold medal in the 60 kg division.
Excellent. Well, Brittany, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
You're an inspiration for First Nations arm wrestlers and female arm wrestlers. And I'm just very appreciative that you took the time for me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ryan. I really appreciate it, and I hope to talk to you soon. I am a huge fan, so looking forward to seeing you again soon.